Well, here we are, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, or 7:01. We're a minute late. Joe and Joe on the Joe and Joe Weather Show on Thursday, September the 10th, 2020. Mr. Rayo lost his power a short time ago, but he just managed to miraculously get it back just in time so that
Absolutely.
he can do this program.
Yes. And you know how I feel right now?
I
I
can
mean, I lost power, but I got it back. But I invested a good chunk of money in a replacement uh,
generator.
Davis Weather Center. I did not. I'm keeping the panel that gives all the statistics or whatever. But I
Right.
need to get a brand new because the rain gauge never seemed to work properly. We've had two massive bouts of heavy rain with two tropical systems, and it registered zero, even after clearing out the top of the rain gauge and
Right.
even looking at the tipping spoon. I said to Renata, I said, let's get a new one. So I invested a nice chunk of money. Well, we had a cloud burst here a couple hours ago, a few hours ago, and guess what?
Zero.
No, not zero.
What? I don't know.
Guess what? The
What?
rain gauge is working
Oh.
again.
Are we going to.
Actually, and it actually pops up. It's raining cats and dogs. Joe, it was raining cats and dogs. I would say, conservatively, at one point we were putting down like let's say a half an inch of rain every 10 minutes,
Wow.
and that's like 3 inches of rain an hour.
Yeah.
It was really pouring on down.
We
So
we got hit pretty hard here this morning.
yeah,
We got into that stuff that came in off the ocean. So we picked up a good, I would say probably a good inch and a half of rain, maybe a little bit more than that. And there was a lot of spots on Long Island, particularly in southeast Nassau, southwest Suffolk County, where there was a lot of flash flooding, some 3 and 4 inch rain amounts in about an hour's time. And now we've got some very heavy downpours around this evening. In fact, the Weather Service expanded their area of flash flood watches up to almost all of New Jersey, except the northernmost counties, and also for a good chunk of eastern Pennsylvania on southward. So, uh, the good news is, though, once we get through this tonight, we have a couple of decent days coming up, and we could take a breather.
yeah, and I'm wondering about the way the models are handling the Sunday system because if you go by what the European is saying, Sunday's going to be a dry day. I tend to doubt that, but it may not be quite. Well, it's not. It should not be as bad as what we've gone
Right.
through.
Well, and the
Uh,
GFS has actually backed off somewhat on the amount of shower or thunderstorm activity for the possibility for Sunday. But the way it looks to me, next week looks really good. I mean, it looks like the whole week. And even though that first high that comes down for Monday and Tuesday, when we're going to be so nice and cool, um, that goes out. There's another little weak cold front that comes through on Wednesday with a reinforcing high for the second half of next week. So we may go the whole week without a drop of rain and with reasonable temperatures and reasonable humidity.
I'm looking at dew point temperatures next week, generally in the mid 40s to near 50 for much, if not all, of next week,
Uh,
and that's
that's
for
going to
the
be
most
that's going to.
likely.
I cannot wait. I hope it gets the fish moving in some of the local ponds around here because the water's so darn warm that you can't catch anything. The fish don't want to move. The
Right.
water's well, the warm water has less oxygen in it, so they really don't move very much. So once it starts cooling off, particularly at night, it freshens them up. So they
Right.
start biting at biting at the lures and the bait. So we've got, of course, the goings on with the regular weather here locally. We still have all that smoke from the wildfires in the west. We could show you that on the satellite. But increasingly, Joe, with the tropics, I'm getting more every day that goes by. I'm getting a little more interested on a couple of levels. First off, I don't know if you saw, but we've had a number. The models seem to be going with the idea that Paulette will become a hurricane and make a pass for Bermuda
Right.
before it makes a recurve. Now I'm thinking next week with the big high up to the north, Monday and Tuesday. We could get some pretty good wave action around here at the shore if we wind up if there's a hurricane in that position.
Oh, no question. And it'd be like in essence, it's like a gigantic egg beater or agitator near Bermuda. And if it's positioned anywhere near there, that means that that opens up the entire Atlantic seaboard from Florida all the way up to Maine, with potential for sea swells and rip currents and undertow. So, not to say that that's meaningful in the sense that the beach season is unofficially over now, and
Right.
you wouldn't find very many people anyway along the shore areas, um, in the middle of next week. But still, I'm sure that they'll be putting up red flags and
Oh yeah,
warning people.
the beaches here are they keep them open now on the weekends right up until Columbus Day, and they make sure they charge you the parking lot fee. Used to be they all shut down. You can go during the week, and the lots, there's nobody manning the lots, but they still have them where you got to pay whatever it is now, $10 to park on the weekend. So I'm getting interested in the tropics with that. I'm also getting interested with all these systems running around, and I would just caution everybody because I know, but from reading comments, everybody looks at models that are up on the internet, and I get that. And the GFS in particular, which for 5 run, I always pay attention to models in the long range if they keep doing the same thing over and over again. And I'm kind of astounded on how the GFS for 5 or 6 runs in a row now is trying to bring this wave that just moved off the African coast straight across to the west, develops it into a tropical storm or a hurricane, takes it through the islands, and then tries to bring it up the East Coast in some fashion. And I know it's longer term. I'm when I start to see the model doing it over and over and over again on every single run with where it doesn't vary too much, it gets my antenna up. So I'm gonna start watching closely. There's a lot of variability of what's going on out in the tropics. Too many systems running around. You have the upper ridge in the Atlantic it comes and goes. So that I think is going to wind up being the driving force regarding any additional threats to the U.S. mainland in the longer range. And we'll get into all of that in just a little bit.
And Paulette, if you believe the GFS, Paulette is really going to flex her muscles, so to speak,
Oh yeah.
by about the middle of next week. I mean, that thing looks like a real nasty little system, and the folks on Bermuda may very well be getting increasingly concerned about this right now.
Well, the Hurricane Center certainly has put that in their headline on their advisory, so they're on top of it. But let's take a look at what's happening tonight. First, we'll stay home, and then we'll go elsewhere. But I'll just bring up. They'll start off with the wide radar view, Joe. And of course, we've been dealing with this arc of clouds that has worked in from off the ocean from yesterday. We had overnight downpours and flash flooding, like we said earlier. Now we still have that, and we have this cold front that's starting to move east and pressing in. The dew points here, it was steamy here this afternoon. The dew points were probably up at about 74, 75,
Right.
and you're getting these tropical downpours and thunderstorms that are producing very heavy rainfalls. And the radar's pretty busy tonight overhead.
It is, and we had a few cracks of thunder here with that heavy downpour that I mentioned a few hours ago, and the chances are that we're going to be in line for more convection, at least for another few more hours. And I don't think the last raindrops are going to be finished with the tri-state area in general until after about 2 or 3 in the morning.
Yeah, I have the Fort Dix radar up, and it looks like southern New Jersey right now is getting, this Fort Dix's radar is having some problems. I may just go to Dover. Let's go down to Dover. It gives you usually the wider view. But here you can see even there they're having some issues. But some heavy downpours. Looks like they've exited the Washington D.C. area. There looks like another big downpour around Baltimore at the moment at 7:10, and raining fairly heavily in central and northern Delaware, up through the southern New Jersey counties, almost but not quite to 195. And now I'll go to the Upton radar because that flashing is driving me crazy. Some strong cells north of Trenton, through probably just along and northwest of the Turnpike, back over to about New York City, and then take the Upton radar. a line of downpours along the shores of southern Connecticut. Naturally, I'm in a hole right now. Other than maybe a couple of sprinkles, there's not too much going on Long Island. But then the stuff off New Jersey, Joe, is passing just to my south. So we got to let this all play through tonight. And once that happens, then we'll see weather conditions get better.
It hopefully will be getting better, and I will say that let's get it all out of the way now because there's a fair chance. Again, assuming Sunday we don't see all that much, if anything, to be for Sunday. But again, a nice stretch of dry weather coming our way for next week, and I think we get what in the month of September we get like 4.5 inches of rain, and some places have already received that much. I saw on one of the evening news reports Washington got severe flash flooding today. Some parts
Yes.
of the nation's
Yeah.
capital had over a half a foot of rain.
A lot of areas down there had flash flood warnings up since this morning. We also have some heavy rains along the west coast of Florida. We actually have two weather systems here, one that's in the eastern Gulf of Mexico and one that's east off the Florida east coast, which actually the Hurricane Center mentions both of them in their discussion tonight. And we'll show you. I'll bring the satellite up momentarily. I just want to show where else we have some rain, and that's back in parts of West Texas, some showers and storms in East Texas, and you're seeing also some rain northern Illinois into southern Wisconsin and over Lake Michigan. You're still seeing, by the way, the rotation of the upper low back through Colorado that's producing some rain showers, and who knows, maybe there might even be a snowflake or two in some of the highest elevations. And of course, the folks in the west, not a drop of rain anywhere up and down the west coast. It is absolutely bone dry. And we're seeing it again, the smoke here from the fires. This is not fog. Oftentimes, when you look at the West Coast, particularly in the earlier part of the day, you'll see the morning low clouds and fog from the cold Pacific. This is not fog. This is actually the smoke from the fires that you're seeing down, covering almost all of California, down into Arizona, down through the Baja Peninsula, and into Mexico. I mean, this is just, it's awful. But it continues yet for another day, and unfortunately, there's nothing in the cards as far as breaking the pattern down and getting something to move this stuff out of there. But it's all trapped.
It's really a sad irony that here in the Northeast we're getting too much rain, and
Right.
meanwhile out west where they really can use the rain to help in the dousing of the flames, they've got nothing. It's just bone dry and very hot once again.
So here's on the satellite, Joe. The setup again, fairly interesting. Well, they're all interesting, unless it's absolutely bone dry from coast to coast. But you still have, we're still waiting for this upper low to kind of get out of the way, and for the jet stream to the north to just lower enough so that we can get our stuff out of the way. We've got all this Atlantic moisture that of course has come in. But eventually, as we go through the night, this jet is going to lower enough, and we'll get into just enough of a northwest flow to get this stuff out of here. Meanwhile, as I said earlier, we were talking about the stuff on the radar. This is disturbed weather. Whoops. Sorry about that. Let's get the pen up again. Here we go. This, you have two areas of disturbed weather near the U.S. mainland that the Hurricane Center is talking about in their last discussion. You have this off the Florida East Coast, and you have some kind of upper trough here in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. I'm thinking the upper trough to me doesn't really, I don't think it's going to do very much. It'll probably, you'll see the storms flare up, and then once we get past sundown, they usually weaken. But I'm a little more interested in this area here, east of the Florida coast. I've noticed that at least through the day today, the shower and thunderstorm activity has increased somewhat. It's still very disorganized, but it might be worth watching as it heads to the west and gets into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, because once it does that, that upper trough that's in the eastern Gulf will be long gone, so that conditions here may become a bit more favorable for something to develop, say later in the weekend or for the first part of next week. But I wouldn't discount this system that's off the Florida East Coast because of the fact that these showers and storms seem to be increasing. But in the meantime, my question to you, Joe, is these clouds that are up up to the north, I thought that we might have to fight some cloud cover for the first part of tomorrow before we see decreasing clouds and increasing amounts of sunshine, because there's
Yes,
so much up there that has to get out of the way first.
I agree with you. It's going to be two things are going to happen slowly tomorrow. I think number one, the clearing away of the clouds, and number two, the lowering of the dew points. It'll be better tomorrow. I mean, we're certainly not going to see what we saw today, dew points in the low and mid 70s. Tomorrow afternoon, dew points will be around 59, 60. I think that's a nice come down from where we are now, but it's still a bit on the humid side. I think we're going to have to wait until tomorrow night before we get any real, real big drop in the humidity, and also a noticeable clearing of the skies. We'll still have quite a bit of cloud cover to deal with, especially early in the day on Friday. But on the other hand, a good point or a good note is that tomorrow, as you know, is 9/11, and once again they will have the ceremonies down at Ground Zero at the where the Freedom Tower is, and it looks like right now it'll all happen under dry, albeit somewhat cloudy conditions. I think again, the last of the rain will be moving on out after about 2 or 3 in the morning, and that should leave the rest of the night dry and should leave the day overall tomorrow dry as well.
Yeah, I think the rain will be gone by daybreak. And finally, this frontal boundary that has been stationary for the last 3 days, well up to the north and west in upstate New York and across the Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, has finally started moving. So it's just a matter of getting it to go by, and then we can get into this nice high. These temperatures across Minnesota at 2 o'clock this afternoon, many areas and parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin were only in the upper 40s and low 50s. So this is of course, some of this area was getting some rain to help to hold the temperatures down, but right in the heart of the high, temperatures were around or just under or just over the 50-degree mark. So this is a relatively cool air mass. The coolest of the air is going to go by to our north, but we're certainly going to participate in some of the lower dew points that'll be coming down through New England and into into downstate New York, and probably getting down into the northern mid-Atlantic states for later tomorrow and for Saturday. So certainly looking forward to that. And also, again, lower pressures off the Florida East Coast, and also some lower pressures in the eastern Gulf of Mexico. But all the winds in the eastern Gulf are from the southeast, so we don't have any kind of circulation there. And all the winds for now off the Florida East Coast are from the east, so there's no low level circulation there either. But again, the one off the east coast of Florida is the one I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to. So on to the GFS, and I thought we'd do the tropics now. Are you okay with that?
Sure.
All
Yeah.
right. So here's the way I look at it. Let's start with the satellite, and the satellite loop shows just how busy the tropics are. Everything is, in one form or another, seems to be spinning here. You have, and let me just make sure everybody can see them on the shot, which that you can. Good. So we have. Oh, I drew the circles from from yesterday, and they're actually still there. That's not too bad. So here's Paulette. Here's Rene right behind it. Here is the strong tropical wave that has moved off the African coast. And I got to draw that really tight because there's another strong wave right behind it. It's like this conga line of tropical systems that's out there. And of course, we'll circle the system off the Florida East Coast, and we'll even give acknowledgement to the upper trough that's in the Eastern Gulf. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 different systems out there, 2 of them with names. And as you know, Mr. Ray, I've been saying for many days now, the fact that we've got all of this stuff running around is making for big headaches with weather models from run to run. As these systems interact with each other in one form or another, they're just too many systems too close together. And Paulette, to me, looks like is going to be the dominant one between that and Rene. They're not that far apart, And I think it's quite possible that Rene will either get deflected to the north and eventually to the northeast, or it could wind up just simply getting entrained into the circulation of Paulette and get absorbed, which is not exactly a fate that I would, enjoy. But nonetheless, uh, here's the thing, folks. Once these two systems get out of the way, and this is what's important to watch Paulette once it makes the turn and goes wherever it winds up, but it's going to make a pass very close to Bermuda. I don't know if it's going to go, very, very close or right over the island, or it may even pass a little bit to the south of Bermuda and then go west of Bermuda as it makes the turn. But when that gets out of the way, that is going to be really important, because once Paulette gets out of the way, that is going to allow for a ridge of high pressure to build across the subtropical Atlantic again. And if that ridge materializes, it's going to mean that the tropical wave that is now just off the African coast is going to be able to take a track pretty much straight to the west. And that is going to be something, I think, that is going to develop, and something that we may have to pay attention to in the longer term. All right, but
Well,
the Paulette and the ridge that may build behind it, to me, is the key to the forecast longer term for the other tropical systems that follow.
we're going to have to see, though, Joe, just how strong and just exactly where the axis of that ridge is, because if the ridge does indeed blow up and goes a little bit more to the north, what may happen is that the next system, the system that you're alluding to, coming off of Africa, goes goes in the along the southern periphery of
Right.
that high pressure zone, but maybe just far enough north so that when it makes the turn, instead of turning up, let's say along the eastern seaboard, it might actually turn or make the turn early and may
Yeah.
curve again just away from the coastline, sparing us of any aggravation. But
Certainly, that's on a long list of possibilities. But the ridge, I think, is going to be key. And I brought up the GFS, the latest 18Z run, to kind of illustrate this. And starting out with what we have at the moment is there we go. Just had a little bit of a technical issue there for a second. So here's what we have. There's an upper low that's south of the Azores, and you have, at least looking at this from the standpoint of the upper features, you can see the tropical wave, which is here, and you can also, actually, that's from Tuesday. Let me just move it up a couple of days. It said analysis, but I had the wrong day up. So now we've got. Let me get it to Thursday. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, but NCEP has been having a lot of difficulties in the last couple of days. So guidance has been slow to arrive in many locations. So just bear that in mind. But here we go with tonight's GFS. So we can pick out these tropical systems and the non-tropical ones. You've got an upper low near the Azores, so there's a bit of a weakness right in here, okay? And here's Rene, here's Paulette. Paulette, there's an upper high off the east coast. Paulette is kind of getting underneath that. It's sort of on the edge of it, but it's just enough of it's tucked in under that ridge, that upper high, that I think it's going to want to get deflected off to the left. And in the meantime, Rene should wind up getting deflected a bit more to the right. And Rene remains weak. And that's another thing here. If Rene was a stronger system, I think the outcome here would be different. But if we watch Paulette, there's this narrow ridge here, Joe, and this is going into Saturday. But there's this kind of narrow upper high that it's trapped under, and it seems to be responding to that. Rene's kind of getting left behind in an area of with a weaker part of the ridge. It's just kind of getting in a bit of a no man's land there. But Paulette seems to drive underneath the upper high. See how it gets cradled there on Sunday, and then the high weakens, and you get a shortwave trough that's moving through the northeast. So this is not going to come, toward the southeast coast or up the east coast. It should respond to that weakness, recurve, near Bermuda, which you can barely see. It's that little speck there that if you could see where I have that the 588 appears, Bermuda is under the last eight. Okay, and anyway, it goes up and around, responding to that short wave, makes a very it makes the turn north and then northeast. Actually passes south of Nova Scotia and very close to Newfoundland on this run.
Maybe near Cape Race.
Right now, here's the thing: watch the next tropical wave, and this is now the map that I have up here is Saturday. Here's the next tropical wave that's moving westward. So you've got Paulette, Rene. This might already be a depression. Who knows? But watch that little circle there. There it is. There it is again. Comes Sunday, and that represents what would probably be Sally. And Paulette is moving northward. The upper high is kind of sandwiching itself in between, and as Paulette pulls away to the northeast, the upper high builds again. And this is where this is what I think is really important is the strength of this upper high. It's a narrow east-west ridge there. That is going to be key to whatever this system does, assuming that it develops as robust as the GFS run shows on this run and on some prior runs. So meanwhile, we're going to be under this beautiful west-northwest flow for all of next week. As we pointed out, our weather here in the Northeast down into the Mid-Atlantic states will be delightful. But as far as the long term is concerned regarding the next tropical wave, assuming it develops, is going to be that upper high in the Atlantic. If it builds the way some of these models say, then you're going to wind up taking it pretty far along to the west before it starts to make the more northwest turn in the longer range. The other thing I would point out, by the way, is if we look at just looking at the European it does not handle that ridge in the same way. The European has a much deeper trough coming in late next week into the northeast, so it has it has a much weaker Atlantic ridge. So anything that the European, in fact, takes the system that's off the African coast now and recurves it in between that weakness. Okay, that's that 1,009 low that you see that's south and west of the Cabo Verde Islands on Sunday. That goes right into this hole that's in between, and it's a whole different scenario. So the building of that ridge, the building of that Atlantic high, is going to be the key to the long range regarding the next two waves moving off the African coast.
Yeah, but the European this year, in terms of handling tropical system, I would have to say, Joe, I wonder if you agree with me that the GFS has had a much better record or run with tropical cyclones or prospective tropical cyclones as opposed to the European.
I would agree. I would agree with that in general. I think that is true. The European on a number of these has been too far to the left or too far to the right. But it seems to me like it has had a difficult time in some of its longer long range products that we don't get to see. The European's actually been pretty good in pointing out threat times for the U.S. in the long range. It's picked the few the ones that have hit the U.S. mainland. It kind of saw them in the long range, but for some reason it's having a whole lot of difficulty with them in the short range. But yeah, I would agree with your assessment.
Yeah, and it's what can I say? I said this yesterday or the day before that maybe not necessarily. Well, actually, next week will be interesting. It'll be quiet weather here, but it will still be interesting to stand off on the sidelines and see what's happening down in the tropics. And then if things really start to crank up, the following week could turn out to be a most interesting and active week for us. So we'll see.
Agreed. So our upper air, as we move through today and through tomorrow and the weekend, of course, we have this trough that's running through Labrador and eastern Canada. We have an upper high that's down in North Carolina, but the surface high is up to our north, so that's a good thing. And then, of course, the next shortwave trough swings through. You see Paulette there reflected in the upper air. It looks like it's moving west-northwestward once it passes Bermuda, but starts to make the turn because here's our jet stream, okay? And here's your next shortwave that's coming down. That's what catches Paulette and takes it out to the north and then kicks it away to the northeast. And here's our flow next week, Joe, is northwest aloft all week long. The ridge is flat and down along the Gulf Coast. So as you said, the dew points are going to be in the 40s and low 50s pretty much all week long. As long as we hold on to that northwest flow, we'll just keep getting cold fronts coming through. And there's your next system on this GFS run, which, because of the fact that it has such a strong Atlantic ridge, brings it very close to Florida and off the North Carolina coast. And then, of course, it goes south and east of us. But prior runs were actually shooting it either up the coast or just inland of the coast or just to the west. Again, this is all long range. And, the one thing I will say is the fact that the GFS has been doing this for 5 or 6 runs in a row has got my antenna up. But we'll have to see whether that Atlantic ridge is going to be developing the way the model says, or is it going to be like the European with a deeper trough in the east, along the east coast, and the much weaker upper high out in the Atlantic. So the big question for us short range, Mr. Rayo, is Sunday, because after tonight, tomorrow and Saturday, not much of a problem. Showers and storms tomorrow evening from North Carolina, from Southern Virginia down into the Gulf states and Florida, and again on Saturday. But that high holds on, so I think we're good. And then Sunday, as you said, maybe winds up. Maybe we'll get a couple of showers or a thunderstorm or two, but even the GFS on this run, Joe, has far fewer showers and storms here. In fact,
Yes.
it has hardly anything. It's mostly goes upstate New York, western PA, and then it just dries out.
Well, as you know, Joe, I have access to additional
You have all
graphics.
those secret. You have all those secret progs that I don't get to
Secret
see.
products, and from what I was able to see, I didn't see any precipitation falling at all on Sunday, based upon what the European is saying. Now that could change, but it certainly doesn't look like a wet or rainy day for Sunday. And in fact, if we do get anything, it might just be a few spotty showers, if that much at all.
Yeah, I was just taking a peek to see the NAM, but apparently the NAM is missing in action today because of the NSET problem. The GFS is what we have to work with, and it's not showing very much for Sunday with this front. Again, you do see showers up in western New York, western PA, probably a couple of thunderstorms. You see Paulette on the lower right, and yeah, that is snow up in Labrador before somebody asks. And then, of course, this next high builds in. You get another weak front that kind of comes through here along about Wednesday night. Early Thursday, you'll hardly notice it. And another high builds in for the end of the week and into next weekend before we get the next cold front of importance, which may not be until next weekend anyway. So we might be in cruise control all next week, which would be great.
I know we have viewers, and I don't know if they're watching right now tonight, but I know we have viewers in the UK and Ireland.
Yes, we do.
And the way Paulette is projected to move via the that upper level wind flow after it passes Newfoundland, that thing may get slingshot toward Ireland or
Well,
the UK.
well, it could. The pattern is certainly progressive enough across the Atlantic to go west to east. The GFS actually takes it up to Greenland as what is that? A 9. It becomes this super duper non post tropical cyclone. I think that's a 936 pressure. Didn't we have a storm last fall that got energized up there where the pressures got down to some ridiculously low number for a non-tropical system?
I vaguely remember
Why
that.
does 918 or 920 millibars stand out in my mind? I gotta find out. I gotta look that up again. But it has a very wrapped up cyclone from Paulette that winds up going into Greenland, into
That wouldn't
southern
be
Greenland.
Dorian, would it?
What's that?
Dorian.
I don't
Remember?
think no Dorian got to 90. Dorian got down to around 900 millibars, or 905, I think, when it was sitting over the Bahamas for 3 days. But there was one of these ocean systems that became a post-tropical system and wound up, as I recall, becoming this monstrous Atlantic superstorm out. I don't recall whether it wound up going into Ireland or the UK, but I got to go back and look. Once upon a time, my memory would have been like just like that. I would be whipping out the dates and
Oh
the
yeah,
times and the
yeah.
pressures. That don't happen no more. And even with a few glasses of wine, but nonetheless, I do want to just take a brief. I want to just want to take a look for the folks out west, because you're looking for some kind of pattern change here in the longer term. And actually, just noticing here, it's going to take a while. You may have to wait a bit, but there is some kind of upper low. You're in a ridge position in the west because of all the troughing that's to your east, and that doesn't help. But as we move into the middle part of next week, there is an upper low that comes into very close to the north coast, the northwest coast of California. So this might be, but you got to wait till you're probably going to have to wait until through the weekend, certainly, and into the middle part of next week before you get anything out of it. And it's nothing to write home about either in terms of the amount of showers it'll produce. But what can I tell you? But but there is at least something that may come in and bring in some change in the overall weather pattern in the west. But you're going to have to wait until the middle part of next week for that.
Yes.
All right, so
There's not much. There's not much I can add to that.
no. So I'm back full screen. Let me just get the chat board up here and say hello to everybody.
Seems like a lot of people tonight, Joe. Even though it's not yet the anniversary, but there has been a lively discussion on the chat board about tomorrow, 9/11, and
Mm-hmm.
all of the terrible, memories that it brought and devastation to life that it caused. And I think Chuck Cardillo mentioned earlier on the chat board. He said, "I don't think anybody could forget what they were doing when that first plane hit and where they were."
Yep,
Um,
that's quite
I,
true.
my wife was watching. She was in the living room. We were living on Long Island at that time, and watching. Um, she was watching the CBS morning show with Bryant Gumbel, and he was doing a cooking segment. Believe it or not, he was wearing an apron, and she's watching, and all of a sudden, the screen goes herky jerky for about 5 or 6 seconds, and she says, "What the heck is that? What's going on?" or whatever. And we later realized what it was. It was when the first plane hit the North Tower. That was the tower with the television antenna, the big TV mast or transmission tower. As soon as that happened, apparently the tower started shaking violently, which caused that disruption. And then of course everything kind of calmed down and then went back to normal. And they broke for a commercial, and then when they came back out of commercial, that's when they showed the first pictures of that big gaping hole in the
In the
north
North
tower.
Tower.
And
I had just finished a 5 mile run, and I was on the overpass of Hawkins Avenue and the LIE when my my flip phone, you know what the flip phone is, Joe.
yes,
When my flip phone, um, I couldn't, it wasn't working. Couldn't call out. Nothing was going through, which I thought was kind of strange. So I walked back and I stopped at a local store that a friend of mine owned, and he had the TV on, and that's where I found out what was going on. I met up with another friend there. I asked him to give me a ride home, and I wound up having to go to work that day to PIX. They had me over at. They told me to go to the Nassau Community Hospital because that was one of the places where they were going to bring people. And as we know, there were no people to bring, and I was there the whole night and part of the next day, and then wound up being taken into Manhattan, which was very surreal. I mean, the whole thing was just sort of a surreal experience, even for the next number of weeks afterward. I always remember that feeling of time standing still. There was that. It just feels like no, time is not. You kind of lose the concept of the days going by. It feels sort of like one long day. I know we kidded about that with respect to the beginning of this pandemic and everything else, but I think that was because we were all stuck at home. But this because of we all knew people we know all knew people that lost their lives there, and everything else, all the ramifications of the day to day life in New York City and so on. It just really was very. And I would drive into work for weekends, and you'd still see the smoke that was smoldering on the drive in. It was very sad. I mean, it's still very sad.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
have there's somebody when again, when I was living in Levittown on my block, there was somebody who worked for the Port Authority police. My daughter Maria played with her kids, with his kids, I should say, and the gentleman's name is Paul Jurgens. Um, he saw what happened. He rushed to the scene. He didn't have to rush to the scene, but he rushed to the area where the towers were hit. And sadly, after the second tower collapsed, he was underneath that. They never found him.
Yeah.
Never found any remains. And my block, which was where I live, Dogwood Lane in Levittown. Now, right above that, you also see Paul Jurgens Lane as well. They named it after him. And every time, tomorrow will be again the 19th time that they're going to be down there, going one by one, the names of those who were lost. And I always sit and wait until they get to the J's, until they get to Paul's name, and I always say a little prayer for him because I tell you a quick, really a quick story. The week before, was it the week or maybe it was a few days before? We always had on my block a block party, an end of summer block party, and in 2001 they had we always got a disc jockey who played records. This particular year, the disc jockey set up his loudspeakers literally right in front of my house. And even when I was inside, the house was like shaking and reverberating sometimes when he played a particularly loud piece of music. If you're a Yankee fan, you could fix this date exactly. The day of the block party, the evening of the block party, music is continuing to play. I'm saying to myself, I wish this guy would stop. I wish the block party would end. It was like 10 o'clock at night. And all the people on our block were Yankee fans for the most part, not Met fans, but Yankee fans. This was the night when Mike Messina was flirting with a perfect game. And I said, this is it. This is how I'm going to clear the block party and put an end to it. I ran outside and told everybody, I said, hey, folks, Yankee fans, Mike Messina is pitching a perfect game. He's taking it to the ninth inning. Well, of course, everybody scurried off the street, almost everybody. Everybody ran into their house to see the final inning of that game. It was against the Red Sox, except for a scattering of a few people. And the disc jockey starts playing one more song. I said, they're gone. What are you playing music for? He said, I always end my gigs with this last song. And it was Last Dance. I think it was Donna Summer's
Right.
Last Dance. And so he plays Last Dance. And as I'm walking back to the house, I turn and look around my shoulder, and who is one of the last couples on the block dancing close with each other, but Paul Jurgens and his wife. And all these years later, when I hear Last Dance, I say to myself, that truly was
Was.
truly was for them, I guess, the last dance. And it is very, very sad.
Well, I'll share one story, and then we can wrap it up for tonight. But one of my former neighbor, there was the firehouse in one of the firehouses in Lower Manhattan, where 27 firefighters in that house, 24 of them uh, did not come home, and my neighbor was scheduled to work that day. The night before, one of his mates called him and asked him if he would switch days. And my friend said, okay. So he wound up being off an extra day. We wound up being off, and this other person that replaced him came to work. So I mean, it was just a random thing. It wasn't my neighbor that called up asking for that day off. It was the other person that called
Right.
up and said, "I can you switch with me because I need this other day. I'll come in for you tomorrow, and then you come in for me, whenever." So it was one of those twists of fate because chances, you can finish the story yourself. The person who switched wound up being killed. So that could
Right.
have very well been my neighbor instead. So it's like one of those things where you wonder. I mean, you really seriously wonder why you know fate lent a hand and saved one person's life and ended another. So
Well,
it's just
a
strange.
similar a similar spin on what you just said. Well, and you and I both worked with this guy. His name is Bart Del Army.
Hmm.
Uh, he was a cameraman at News 12,
Yes.
and then he later went to become a cameraman over at Pix 11 when you were
Right.
there.
I know Bart. Sure.
Right. Well, when I was at City College back in the early '70s, and I used to, as you did too, I used to hang out on my free time at the weather station up there.
Hmm.
All of a sudden, there was a guy who appeared at the door, and he was in the communications department, and they were putting together a mock newscast, and they were going to have a simulated newscast of a new couple of news anchors, a sports guy. He came to the weather station because he wanted to know if there was anybody there who could be the quote weathercaster for this mock newscast that they were going to have in the communications building. So a couple of people looked at me and said, "Here's your guy," and they I was immediately nominated. So I went with this guy, and we went down and we did this mock or make believe newscast with these students who were majoring in communications, and we had a lot of fun and everything else. Years later, when I'm at News 12, the phone rings, and who it is? It's the guy who put on this, the head of the instructor who put on this newscast at City College, and we're chatting, and he says, "Well, I know how you did. You ended up being on television at Channel 12." And I said, "Yeah, what are you doing?" And he said, "Oh," I said, "I work for Channel 11." I said, "Really? So what do you do?" He said, "Oh, I'm the engineer. I go up on the World Trade Center in the overnight and early morning hours
Yes.
to take the readings on the transmitter for WPIX." And he said, "I usually get off around, I'm there from about 2 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock in the morning. That's my job during the week." When this happened, obviously, one of the things that I thought of immediately was this guy that I knew from City College, and and I felt so bad. I said, "Oh God," I said, I always thought that he had perished in the tragedy, in the collapse of the World Trade Center. And it wasn't until Bart made the move from News 12 to Pix 11, and he ended up running into this guy. And this guy said, "Hey, I went to school with Joe Rayo, and blah blah blah." And when Bart called me and told me about this, I said, "Oh my God!" He says, "Ask him if he was the guy who was on the World Trade Center." Obviously, he wasn't there that morning, and it turned out he was. He just by happenstance, that was a day off, or somebody else asked to work for him that day. But Bart brought us together. Bart somehow we managed to meet at a place outside of News 12. He brought this guy along. We saw each other for the first time in like 30 some odd years. Mind you, now I had met the guy, I'd seen this guy in real life since when we were in college in the early mid '70s. But the fact that it was on my mind all these years, I thought he had
Yeah.
died in the thing. And so when I saw him, we embraced. I started to cry. I said, "You don't know how happy I am."
Yeah.
Uh,
It was. There were a number of. I know there were a number of people, but that day, I had family members that worked out in Wall Street and in the World Trade Center. My brother was a regular in the World Trade Center. He just happened that day he wasn't there, so that was But you're waiting to hear from these people.
yeah,
You're worried like hell, but thankfully, from all my family anyway, Uh, they were not there. My brother-in-law was there, and he got out, and he was very, described what was like a harrowing situation with respect to the when when the buildings came down, and being sort of overwhelmed by it all. It's very hard. It's just very hard all the way around.
You know, you don't think about that. You don't think about nine. You're right. You say, all right, 9/11. We all remember that thing. But I can assure you, tomorrow, just watching, the names being called off, listening in the background. There's always somebody playing a cello,
Hmm.
a sad song or whatever like that. And then all of the memories that flood back on that day, and then you just then you realize, like, my God, it's still all these years later. It
Yeah.
still hits you really hard.
Well, let's all remember tomorrow. Take a at least a moment of silence to remember the what happened on September 11th, and for those of you who lost loved ones, um, you know, of course, it's still for almost everybody that lost loved ones. The hurt is still very, very raw. So take a minute of your day tomorrow. Take a moment of silence with regards to honor the folks that died on September 11th. So Joe and I will not do a show tomorrow night. So we're going to take Friday off, and
Oh, really? I just learned about that.
yes. Well, I'm just trying to think ahead. So tomorrow there really won't be too much to report. So I think we'll skip tomorrow, and we'll see what's going on Saturday with Paulette. And for sure, we'll come back for our usual Sunday morning Joe and Joe weather show at
Yes,
10
sir.
o'clock. But maybe we'll be on Saturday. So everybody just be aware. You might see a notification come up. That will be us. Okay?
Right.
So Scott Briller, the chairman, is off doing COVID runs, and we of course wish him all the best and that he stays safe. And we'll have our regular Briller Jeopardy trivia come the next time we're on. So maybe on Saturday, but for sure Sunday morning at 10 o'clock on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. And by the way, don't forget, folks, you can listen to this as a podcast at any time. If you go Joe and Joe Weather Show on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the places where podcasts go to live, we're there. All right. Have a great night. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you. We'll see you next time over the weekend.